One. Hello, divine, beautiful souls. This is Energy Speaks podcast with your host, Catriel. Here we have the Zodiac Energy Empowerment Series that we're in the middle of, and we're in the week of Gemini for this podcast, and also in the week of Gemini. And we have our practitioner for our in-person class, Nettle Greenman. I am so grateful for you to be here. Thank you.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, it's a beautiful enough day in Florida, so I'm happy.
I love it. Uh, so Nettle and I have known each other for quite some time. We actually met at synagogue. God, how many years ago? Were you there with
Oh
Danielle?
God. Yeah, no, it's got to be 7 or 8 years. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. And we might be cousins. I think we're cousins through marriage distantly, which is a recent discovery because the world is all connected in very weird and mysterious and wonderful ways, even whether it means it or not.
Right? Oh man, that is so funny. Like, when I found out that Ian is her husband, um, was from Michigan area, and then he mentioned Wyoming Park, and I'm like, that's where my dad went. Like, what? No one knows that area. Like, what?
And we just
It-
found out that his great grandmother was a DeWitt, and how many DeWitts are there in the world in, that little geographic circle. Well, a lot
Ironic,
actually, but they're
a
all, well,
lot
many, but they're
actually.
related. Okay, but they're all related.
And it's like a lot. You should have seen how many of my how much family I have on that side. It's our clans. We just keep growing.
It's really cool. It
Oh man. Well, I want to take our conversation into getting to know you a little bit more. Um Nettle, you're a writer, you work with improv of all different forms. What tell us a little bit about yourself.
That's such an open question, but
I know,
in
right?
this context, yeah, I know, but you don't want my entire life story. So in this context, um, I'm just sort of your all-around creative, and a number of the ways creative, but like not famous or anything. Just I do stuff. Um, so in this particular context, some of the things that I've done um are so I improv in Seattle, in not in Seattle, I'm in Florida. I lose track sometimes. Um, Improv in Florida, in St. Pete, in Tampa Bay has really taken off, in the past 5 or 6 years. There's lots of improv here now. But when I first got here, there was the primary improv was what's now called Spitfire. They had a different name when I started, but now there's Spitfire Comedy House or Spitfire Comedy Theater. They had a different name when I was working with them. So I trained with them because I liked the idea of improv. And uh it, it's funny because while I was just shortly after I started taking improv training, I discovered that my birth father, whom I didn't grow up with, was actually like an improv, like one of the fathers of modern improv. There's actually a movie about him. Who knew?
Wow.
Um, that made me feel like I needed to be better than I was. And but I just do improv for fun. And I do sketch comedy. I'm a professional book editor. I've done that forever, for my entire, adult life, pretty much. And I also I edit science fiction and fantasy, so I spent a lot of time immersed in other people's stories, um, because their stories are always, even in fiction, your backstory is always present because that's kind of the thread that runs through the world. Is we're always sort of writing about ourselves in some respect. Um, I also write stories. I'm not a novelist because I can't kind of hold on to the same thread for long enough to write a novel, even though I edit other people's novels. So I write short stories and I write sketch comedy. I also sing. Nettle comes actually from an old Live Journal, if you remember Live Journal, which was kind of one of the very early social media platforms. Live
Hmm.
Journal yeah, so LiveJournal, in contrast to Facebook, required that you have a handle. This is back in the day when nobody on the internet used the real name. So I chose Singing Nettle as a handle, and Singing Nettle was a pun because I sing, and I'm also an amateur herbalist. And nettle is, if you're an herbalist, you have like a plant that resonates with you, and nettle is like my plant. It's spiky, but it has a pretty flower and it's really useful. But if you don't handle it well, it'll sting the crap out of you. So, for in this, yeah, because I've got a sort of a spiky streak too. So I'm very useful and, sometimes I have a nice flower, but I also don't take any nonsense. So and I sing. So
Sting.
singing no, so Singing Nettle was my nickname. And then when I morphed over to Facebook, it just became Nettle. And eventually that just became my identity. That just became my name. And very few people know me by my legal name anymore, so everyone just calls me Nettle. But the point, and I did have one, was that the thread there was singing. It was originally Singing Nettle because I sing. I sang before I spoke. I sang,
Mm.
I completely confused my mother by singing songs before I actually like talked. And yeah, so I've been singing my whole life and I've done it professionally in some contexts. Um I've, fronted I was part of a band, I arranged music, I um love karaoke, but don't tell anyone other than the 10,000 people who just heard this. Uh okay, you can tell people because I love karaoke. I love karaoke because everyone's so kind. That's why I love karaoke, because everyone's so kind to whoever is up there, whether they can sing or not. But I like to sing, so for me it's like an opportunity to sing. So putting together this idea, so storytelling, improv, music, putting together those things seems um, just like a natural fusion for me, which is why I wanted to teach this workshop. And I don't actually know anybody who's put these things together in quite this way, and there might be a reason for that. So we will see if it works, but I think it will. And if even if it won't, I think it will be fascinating and fun to try.
That's awesome.
You
We'll go into
froze. Did I
we'll
freeze?
a little bit, yeah.
Nerds. Catrail.
Yeah, I'm
Hmm.
here. I'm here.
Okay, you're frozen. I don't know if
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? We're back.
okay,
I have
okay,
no
that's
idea.
weird. Yeah, that's weird. We went away. I hope that doesn't happen again.
Huh. Weird. Anyways, um, before we get more into our class, um, I would love to go more back into your backstory, essentially.
Okay.
So how did you even get into improv?
I've always loved acting. I just have always done acting, singing, storytelling stuff ever since I was like really little. I used to organize plays for my cousins to put on, and they're very game about it. Um, uh, I took some improv in college, and uh, some some time ago, some many years ago at this point in St. Pete, I was just looking around for something new to do and ran across this class in musical improv. Now, I thought that was actually circle singing, which was just one of the things that I want to do, but in this workshop. But so I thought it was circle singing, but it wasn't. It was a class in actually sort of creating an improvisational musical, like and Spitfire Theater does a lot of that. I don't know if anyone else does locally, but they do a lot of that. And you can actually do that. You can actually, if you're a good enough improviser, you can actually catch each other's cues well enough to create songs, and dance numbers in the context of an improv. So I found myself in this class that I didn't expect, but it was still cool. So I stayed. And then I got involved in the theater and no, first I got involved in American Stage. American Stage was doing a free improv class at the time, which they're not doing anymore, which makes me sad. But uh so took some classes with American Stage and I met people. So, just kind of, I never like sort of set out to be, like I want to be an improviser. Is just something that I'd always done and that I'd done a little in college and thought would be cool to do. And you know, just and then discovered, there was a growing improv scene here and stayed kind of involved in that. Fell out during the COVID years, and kind of need to get back to doing some kind of performance, in a way that's safe in the context of, you know, there's COVID's still there. So, I don't like being in close spaces with like a theater, but I still have to go back to it because I'm like, yeah, I need to, I have this
Yeah,
need to do creative stuff with other humans.
I love that. So I want to kind of interweave a little bit of the Zodiac Energy Empowerment Series and why why this class for Gemini and what's the thought process behind it essentially. Gemini is a really unique energy. It's, if we think about it in the calendar, it's now like going into like this kind of summer energy. It's super lit up. It's very witty. It's the communicator and has lots of thoughts and ideas and is very quick thinking. And when I started to think about like what could I do for that? I mean, I thought about several different things. I was like, we could technically do writing, we could do, you know, um improv, acting, anything, like that, anything with communication. But when I started to think about like specifically improv and how like perfect that would be, it's because like the relationships in my life that I've known in regards to Gemini energy, they like again, they're super witty. They can think at the drop of a hat anything and you know um eh, create an entire world through their communication. And to be able to also communicate with others is another huge thing. And so to be able to do that creatively, I thought would be such a unique thing, to experience. Because like the premise behind the Zodiac Energy Empowerment Series is we have all of these energies within us. I mean, we all communicate. We all have relationships. We all, we all need sacred space. We all these different things are all a part of us in different amounts, and some we may be great in. Like for instance, you know, handling plants, something very grounding and earthy, that would be more related towards like, maybe Virgo or Taurus. But we have all of these different amounts within us and we can learn from each other. And so I wanted to kind of like, okay, let's do some super fun classes that will allow us to embody these energies. And then when we get into our everyday life, I posted on a chat, I think it was a couple days ago, like who likes improv, And I just kind of wanted to see where the conversation was going to go, And and someone mentioned, like, yeah, I use improv in connecting with my clients. I never know what their communication style is, so I have to adapt very very quickly to be able to go in the direction that you know is necessary for that conversation. And I'm like, I do that all the time. you know and so I'm really excited to see how we can take specifically, improv through storytelling and sound, and how, when we jump into that energy, how can we use that in our daily life in some way, shape, or form? So I'm super excited. Can you tell us a little bit more ab- about this specific class and what we're going to be experiencing? Sort of, because it's improv.
Improvisational storytelling is different from what you see as, the improv games as we call them. Um,
Yeah.
this is yeah, so this is a specific thing. When you talk about Gemini, improv is always about listening to your partner or partners. Um, you talk about how do you bring that to your life, and I think lots of the time we're also waiting to jump into our story and we don't actually listen. And
Mhm.
improv forces you, well, it doesn't, I mean, if you are improvising and you're sort of immersed in it, you have to listen to your partner. But improvisational storytelling is different. So improvisational storytelling is this sort of specific thing. Um, there is so I'm going to jump to storytelling. So in storytelling, at least in Western literature, all stories kind of proceed the same way. There's once upon a time, whether in French it's il y a une fois, there's almost every Western and probably Eastern too, but Western literature is what I know best, starts with some version of once upon a time, you know, he, it starts with establishing a thing, establishing where we are now. So in the story spine of Western literature, there is once upon a time, there is a person, place, thing situation. Um, Once upon a time, this is the way things are. This is the way things happen. This is the situation we're grounded in. And it goes on, and every day it goes on like this until one day something happens. There's a change point, and that's where the story takes off. Um, and then traditionally the story escalates and blocks get put in the way of this thing proceeding towards a different end. So once upon a time there was a person and every day they did this thing until one day they didn't do this thing, something changed, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and finally something else happens. And ever since then, there's a new normal and things go on in a different way. Now that's the new normal, and that's where that person, place, or situation is. And you can do this with any story. If you could sit down and you can look at it in terms of very complicated movies. You can look at Avatar, Once upon a time there was a Marine who thought he was doing marine or whatever he was, some military guy who thought he was doing the same thing. Some military guy who thought he was doing the same thing. And then one day he was sent to another planet and put in another body, and he met this person and everything for him changed. And then this got in his way, and then this got in his way, and then this got in his way. And then, the sky rained missiles, and everybody tried to stop him, and they tried to like mow down the planet. And then this happened, and he communicated with the world tree, and he became one of those people that he loved so much. And ever since then, he was this is the person he was. And then there are further movies, and they follow the same structure. You could talk about Cinderella. You could talk about any story, and it probably follows what's called this story spine. So the improvisational storytelling, you take the story spine and you stand in a circle, or you sit in a circle, or the line, or whatever configuration works for you. Um, and you do that, so in improv, usually you take a prompt. So somebody suggests something like, you know, give me a person, give me a profession, give me a place. Somebody says, you know, Canada. So then somebody in the group starts, once upon a time, there was this guy in Canada. And then somebody else says, and every day this guy in Canada did this thing. And then somebody else says, and until one day, something changes, and then, the story spins out from there. And it might be funny, and it might be sad, and it might just fall apart. It takes whatever shape it takes. So, that is different from, improvisational games. There are ways that you can use it, like in some improv has these sort of competitions, and there are ways you could use a story spine to like kind of structure a scene, but typically that's not a game itself. It's kind of like a practice. And I like it because, well, I love stories and because surprising things happen and because you have to listen to each other. You
Mm,
can't just kind of you can take it off on your own trip, and sometimes people do, and then when everyone goes, because it's really obvious when somebody's kind of off on their own trip and they're not part of the group energy.
mm,
Um, So circle singing, the musical part of this. Circle singing is something similar in the context of sound. Look up Bobby McFerrin. He's a master of it. Um, so circle singing is harder to describe in this context. It's building a musical composition, and it's ephemeral and only lives in that moment. And you build on each other with it. So one person starts with a noise like beep, 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 and then somebody else adds ba-da-bum,
um,
ba-da-dum, 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 and then somebody asks, and I'm in really bad voice now because I had bronchitis for a while, so I can't sing. Normally, I can sing really well, now I can, like, barely croak, so, and then somebody asks and somebody I adds, "Oh," and somebody adds, "Ooh, ooh, ooh, ooh," and it's amazing that when these things overlap, they create something beautiful and complex, and then you can do this different ways. You can, pull somebody into the middle and have them scat, have them solo, over the group, and or you can appoint a conductor, and that conductor will point at different people and say, okay, you change the sound now. 'Cause it's kind of like if you've ever done physical machine where people kind of do a movement and then somebody else. We'll do that as an exercise because it's kind of the embodiment of this sort of thing.
yeah.
You, but the point is, through all of this, the look up Bobby McFerrin, it'll make more sense. Um, Through all of this is the theme that a group of people each individual takes one part, but then you pay attention to each other, and through that paying attention, you build something that's that's complex. Um, and complex and might be beautiful, maybe not, but it often is. And then you have to let it go. And sometimes it's so beautiful, you really don't wanna let it go. Sometimes you say, "Oh my god, I wanna, codify this. I wanna, like, preserve this moment." And some people do, I've got some recordings of, um circle singing where it was recorded and it became this wonderful composition that then was, saved as a musical composition. Bobby McFerrin has all these recordings that you can look up, some of these terrific collaborations he does with other musicians, and sometimes with just like regular people. But for the most part, when you're doing it in a group like this, it it grows, it lives, and then you let it go. And that's
Mm,
life too. So, I don't know, you can make anything to a metaphor, and it is what it is, and if you're in the headspace to do it, it's also a metaphor, It's a metaphor for community life. We have experiences that don't happen in isolation, and sometimes and eventually, ultimately, we have to let them go, and
mm,
we take something of it with us and having participate in that experience. Every experience we have changes us. So even if we
yeah,
let it go, having had that experience lives in us a little bit. And that's a metaphor for life in all kinds of ways too.
definitely. I love that. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm really excited for this class. Sometimes you just need a change, something creative and something that we don't normally do, you know? So that we can shake things up in a new way and take it into our life in some way, shape, or form. Like you said, like it's you let it go, but sometimes it like comes back in its own way. And with like Gemini, it's this air energy, and so it's very like it's like a breath of life in a way. Excuse me. Um, and I was wondering if you could go more into um your your writing. Um, like how for you, being a part of, physically writing, things and editing and things like that, and improv, how do you see this improvisation happen within your writing?
I haven't really thought about that. I mean, I don't really see them
Yeah.
as the same thing. A lot of writers now, a lot of writers talk about their characters surprising them and their stories sort of they talk about, well, my character wanted to do this, the story wanted to do this. And because I'm an editor, I sort of, my attitude, I'm kind of like a school marm in that way. I'm a little like, you're creating the characters, like they don't get to do things unless you let them. And yet even when I'm writing sketch comedy or have a play that I'm writing that I take out every once in a while and think about, I write short form because for me, when I try to write a novel, when I think about long form, it's like every possibility kinda unrolls out into its own future, and I have trouble sort of narrowing down to one. So I'm a brilliant editor, but in my own writing, I sort of get paralyzed by possibility, and I don't do it. And I don't choose a plot
Interesting.
line. So I write short pieces, but I write
Yeah.
short pieces that are very, eh, they're I'm a good writer. And they're encapsulated, though, they're these little slices of life. Um I'd have to really think about that. I mean, improvisation is about listening to other people, um, your partners. It's about being open to change. Um, by the time I work out a story, by the time I write a story, I've been chewing over it in my head for quite a while. So, it's already taken form, but, I guess those forms change before I fully work it out, it's like I sort of up and puzzle over and turn around different possibilities. And when you're doing improv, when you're doing games particularly,
Mhm.
presents you with a scenario and you've got different ways that you can respond and you have to turn them over in your head and choose a direction really quickly, because
Yeah.
if you don't, like, the audience sees you going, which is not fun in improv. Um, it's one of the reasons I'm not a brilliant improviser with those games. My gift in improvisation was long form. I was kind of brilliant at noticing those change points, where the
Mhm.
story should change and taking the story in that direction. That's the thing I'm brilliant at as an improviser is long form is saying like this is where the story is kinda gestalting all those possibilities in my head, and
Yeah.
then kinda putting them all together and, like, choosing the path. I don't know why I don't do that as a writer. Um, Perhaps, actually, if I, um, did that, I'd be able to write a novel because I do that as an improviser
Yeah.
someone turns to you and says, "And he didn't have his pants on." And it's like, you go, the little computer in your head, you know, all the possible ways you could respond to, and he didn't have his pants on. You're like, "Why didn't he have his pants on? Are we going to be funny? Are we going to be profound? Are we going to be, you know, profane about this? Like, is it art?" And generally you want to be funny. I'm actually I have a tendency to take things into sort of deep, which is sort of difficult with a line from "He didn't have his pants on," but, I that's one of the reasons I break with a lot of traditional My father, whom I didn't know about, did political improvisation. I mean, that's why there's a movie about him, is because he used improvisation to change the world, to make people
Wow.
think, and the comedy does that. From my perspective, I think the best comedy makes you think. But even in these little games, what you're doing is choosing among a world of possibilities really quickly. Um,
Yeah.
so in writing, writing one can choose among an entire world of possibilities really slowly. Um, slowly enough, you never write. Um, but that's I guess that's one possible linkage is you have to choose among the world of possible responses and decide what direction you want to take something.
Yeah. It's interesting. You said something in regards to like listening and listening to the person. I'm gonna frame it into something else because I just had like this thought. Um I've been I've been telling I shared this with you, but I haven't shared this with our audience. So um I've been telling my mom stories each night that are based on my journeys around the world. And I have four specific characters. And what I noticed that when I actually change and go to a new location, I'm actually tuning in to like where the characters want to go. Like it's like they have come to life. And so I'm like, before like whatever comes out of my mouth, somehow there's like a split second kind of thing. Like, yeah, I know I had the journey, but it was like it's very funny when I like actually can read the thought of one of my characters that, they're like coming to life. And then it shifts into a whole nother direction. And I'm like, that's so cool. And it's like, yeah, obviously I'm creating it, but there's like another world that's also creating because I'm speaking worlds into existence. It's so interesting.
Yeah, yeah, that is. I mean, by the time I work on a manuscript, the writer has chosen among those possible worlds, so that's the world that they've chosen to represent or convey or channel or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
and that's the one I'm working with. So I'm making that particular story the best story it can be. But before that, yeah, that they're sort of speaking these worlds into being, whether they exist just inside their own heads or whether there's something larger, that they're channeling that even if it's just inside your head, you're still it's still the result of all your travels through the world, whether those are literal physical travels or, I mean, whether you don't leave your house, you're still interacting with the world. You're still getting and gathering information about the world. And when you write, when you create stories, you're synthesizing all of that. And
Yeah.
sometimes in synthesis, surprising things happen. And
Yeah.
it's good to, when I tell writers, so by the time I get a manuscript, that story needs to be sort of codified. And when I tell writers, no, your character can't go off and do this completely out of character thing, and they say, well, he wanted to, and I'll say, well, by this time, no, your character has to operate in the world of this story and the world of this narrative, and they have to do things that are logical in this narrative. So by the time I get a book to work on, it has to be logically connected. The characters need to do things that make sense in their world for them, for their situation. But before I get the manuscript, while it's in the process of creation, um, sometimes writers are really surprised by the way these characters unroll or the way the story or the plot on the world unrolls.
I love that.
And
Wow.
maybe I'd be a better novelist if I actually let my characters do a little bit more of the driving, but by the time I write a story, I'm pretty sure of what I want to write, but it's spent a lot of time percolating in my head, kind of choosing among those various ways in which that story might take shape.
Mm, mm, I love this. It's funny that I'm wearing this during this
How
conversation. Because immediately when I think of like a really good story, I think of Harry Potter. It's my
That's a very
favorite.
well Oh, and that's a very well that world has its own reality. So when a story's really good, you can sort of extrapolate as though those characters or those stories exist past, the ending of that the closing of that book. I remember when I was in college, I took like one of my first writing classes. I'd been writing for years. I wrote a novel when I was 8. It was terrible because I was 8, but but I wrote a novelette when I was 8. And, it's funny because it actually even though I was 8 and it was terrible, um, maybe it wasn't really that awful. It still kinda was about kind of conveyed who I am because it was, um, a story about, embattled cultures and somebody in the middle kind of getting to know both of those people and bringing them together. Um, the details all around it are just bad, but, because I was 8. But that whole theme of of using communication to bring people together, and my belief that if everybody just kinda sat down for milk and cookies, and took a nap, we could solve a lot of the world's conflicts. Um, if everyone just had to sort of sit down for milk and cookies and, talk to each other, and then take a nap together that we just would stop fighting with each other. I don't know. But that's even when I was a kid, I had this idea that if we can only communicate and Avatar, the film Avatar is about that too. If we can only communicate in the right way, that if we can really understand each other, like we couldn't possibly demonize each other and kill each other. So
Mm.
I had that idea even when I was a little kid. I don't where I was go I don't remember where I was going with this. Um, where was I going with this, Catriel?
We
Got
started with
lost.
Harry Potter and the
Harry
world.
Potter. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
talking about worlds exist. Thank you. So the first writing class that I took, and even though I'd been writing forever and writing poetry forever, I write poetry more than I because it's short form, more than I write anything else these days. But so I'd been writing for, years, even though I took this one class in college. And I wrote a story that was kind of based on something on my real life. It was based on an interaction I had in the bad old days of civil rights unrest, where I had a boyfriend who was African American, and we had a lot of trouble going through the world together. People did not treat us well as a couple. So I
Mm.
wrote a short story based on our relationship. And I finished, it was like in a class where we read things out loud, and I finished the story and there was a silence, and then one of the students said, "Well, what happened after that?" And I said, "Nothing. It's a story. They stopped when the story ended." And my teacher just flipped out. My instructor called me after class, and he just yelled at me that you can't do that to people. That if you're a good writer and you make characters that live, you can't shut down that because they live for people and you can't tell them that they don't exist because now they do exist for people. Even if
Mm.
they don't, maybe they're not walking around the world like embodied, now
Yeah.
those characters exist. And in Harry Potter, you know, whatever the controversies around all of this, whatever my feelings about that writing on a sentence by sentence basis, because honestly, I long to edit those books down. Um, that world exists. That world
Yeah.
is so solid that we know that world. We can extrapolate what happens next and where it goes next, and we could build and we could put new buildings on the campus, and we could put new schools on the campus, and we put new students in the schools. That world is so solid that it may as well have a physical location.
Pretty much.
What do you all want to find? We all want to get on that train and find Hogwarts.
Look, I have plans of having a Hogwarts Express in Florida. I've been I'm like, I just need to find the right person.
Which melds very much with C.S. Lewis's Narnia, where the English school
Seriously.
kids are, they get to there's one of those books, and there's a scene in the film that they made from the books where the kids are waiting on a train platform, you know,
Mhm.
and whatever it's called in London, the Underground, and that train takes them to Narnia, you know? So the idea of the train is nothing's original, you know. So C.S. Lewis created this train to Narnia before J.K. Rowling created the train to Hogwarts, and I'm sure somebody probably did something before that.
Hmm.
You know, but there's
I
this
actually don't
idea.
remember that part.
Yeah, it's there. That and they there's the idea of the train resonates through all the books because um spoiler in case I won't give the spoiler in case somebody wants to read the Narnia series, but
Yeah.
there's a train that figures prominently in the ending of what this 5 books, the last book. So
Oh, I didn't get to read that one. The Last
if
Battle?
so, I will give. Yeah, oh, I don't remember which one it is. It's on the bookshelf behind me someplace, but I don't remember. Maybe. Um, but that's sort of a leitmotif through the books is the train. Um, you know, I think we all want I think many of us really love the idea that there is something bridging the mundane and the magical. And
Yeah.
we don't have a way to get there, and train is a great metaphor, is there is something that ta or carriage, you know, in some other stories. There's some vehicle takes us from our everyday world to the magical world. And since we don't have a literal train, literal method of transportation that does that, I mean, you can say that books, stories are a transportation.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
we've got, you know, is that's the vehicle that takes us from the mundane to the magical.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Wow. Huh. It's like reflecting on so many things you're saying, you know? Um, so I just want to share where the class is and things like that because that's important. I always tend to, you know, almost leave
How
those
to
things out on accident.
how to find the thing.
Sorry.
How to find the thing.
Yes. Okay.
That's important.
First of so our class is literally tomorrow. Yes, I realize that. And Saturday night starting at 8 p.m. until 10:30. It's at the studio at 620. Said the number right, right? And which is March 2nd. And it's $36. You can go on to energyspeaksbycatriel.com, or you can go on to studio at 620 uh to get more information. Either one will work. Again, energyspeaksbycatriel.com. You just go to events and you can get the information there. And again, if you can't figure out where to purchase the ticket for some reason, just come. Just come. We'll take care of all of that there. It's an in-person class, so it's gonna be super fun. I really feel that. And I'm just really, really excited. Thank you, Nettle. Um, the other thing I wanted to address really quickly is also the Zodiac Energy Empowerment Series. You've probably been listening for a little bit and it's like, okay, maybe you've heard about it. If you haven't, this is a little bit of a snapshot of the why. And we've just talked about storytelling, and that's like one of the components that's comprised of this. So essentially, we started with Scorpio, which is all about creating the sacred space. And because what we're really doing is having a dialogue with our creator, with uh, an energy that's bigger than us. And we want to do something in this world. And so in order to do like to really frame ourselves in the highest and best is to create that sacred space. And then we add in ingredients into this little pot or garden or however you want to see this, and we add in the Leo energy, which is the heart, and we um really connect in with our creativity, our creative spark. And we did, art class for that. And um, then we connect that spark to our soul. And essentially, that's about our feelings and our emotions and the ritual in our life and the cycles. And so that was for Cancer energy. And we use moonology and empath work for that. And then we put the next ingredient in, which is Sagittarius, which we actually use storytelling in a way from the Sagittarius perspective to help expand ourselves. Ironically, Sagittarius and Gemini work hand in hand together um, in the zodiac world. So essentially, Sagittarius is our belief system and really opening up our belief system to expand. And so then we add another ingredient, which is Aquarius. Aquarius is this energy of shifting, belonging, shifting our frequency, shaking shift up. And so there's like a uniqueness to that energy. And we have to essentially see this kind of macro energy and look at things from a bird's eye view to be able to to see where we can expand, like we looked in Sagittarius, and how maybe the puzzle pieces fit together and how we can all work together as one organism. And then the fifth energy that goes inside that little space is Gemini, which we're in now, and it's the communicator. So it's taking all this energy from before and connecting all the dots together, formulating the story, communicating that to the universe. You know, we're really co-creating with the universe at this point of getting all of the elements in a specific order. And then we go past that. So like next week we'll be in Libra energy, and that's harmonizing all of the energy together and balancing it out and allowing ourselves to receive this energy. And then we go into Pisces, which is more of like a fluid and etherical energy, and really going into the unknown and capturing that energy of our dreams and and going more into like dreaming big. And then also part of that is compassion for the journey. And then we get into Capricorn, where we start to actually solidify things because everything else was kind of up in the air, literally. And we build this nice foundation for us to move forward in this world and create our dreams and see them formulate. And that's where we actually make decisions and commitments. And then that's for Capricorn. And then we get into Aries, which is all about taking inspired action. So all of the steps that we just went through, we're ready to act on things. We're truly ready to put things into this spring energy and move forward. And then we get into Taurus, which is all about birthing our manifestation, uh, truly moving through that birthing process and seeing something beautiful. And then Virgo is all about the embodiment. We just repeat. We get so used to this rhythm and connecting with these different energies that we're able to truly embody this energy and be one with the universe in some way, shape, or form. And so that's what we're doing here is connecting all these different energies together. And there's so many different ways I could have actually presented that. But um that's the way I chose for this story. And so I hope to see you guys at studio at 6:20. I want to say thank you, Nettle, for being here and sharing your heart, your wisdom, your thoughts. And I'm very excited.
Cool, thank you.
And thank you all, divine, beautiful souls, for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please share it with another, and let's have a fantastic season of the Zodiac Energy Empowerment Series. All right, that's all for today. I love you all.